Hello and welcome to an exclusive discussion on the Arvada Center's upcoming production of Clybourne Park, running from February 14th to March 30th, 2025. This Pulitzer Prize-winning play by Bruce Norris offers a sharp-witted satire that delves into themes of race, community, and identity, exploring the evolution of a Chicago neighborhood over 5 decades. I'm honored to introduce the director, Kenny Moten, whose vision brings this complex narrative to life. Joining him are key cast members, Brik Berkes, portraying Russ and Dan, Kate Gleason, who's taking on the roles of Bev and Kathy, Ghandia Johnson, who's playing Francine and Lena, and Don Randle in the roles of Albert and Kevin. Each of these talented actors brings depth and nuance to their dual roles, reflecting the changing dynamics of the community portrayed in the play. I hope you'll enjoy this unique look into each of their experiences and insights as they prepare to bring this compelling story to the stage. As the director of Clybourne Park at the Arvada Center, what is your driving force behind putting this production on, and why is it something that you chose to share with Denver, Colorado, and all of the audience?
You know, when Lynn Collins, the artistic director, reached out to me, said, "I've been thinking about this play." And I had seen the play before. It had been a while since I had read the play. And it's one of those things, I think Clybourne Park will always be relevant, because it's a piece that you can see yourself in. I think everyone that sees this will see themselves in some way on stage. And it also has this wonderful quality of having a 1959 being in Act 1, 2009 being Act 2. And I think it allows us to see, in the contemporary piece, see versions of ourselves, but also stand back for Act 1 and be a little bit removed from some of the issues that we're talking about. So I think it really just shines a mirror on an audience in a way that does the thing I want theater to do, which is create some conversation and really let us see ourselves on stage. Yeah.
Well, that's a great explanation. And I actually think I got ahead of myself because I would love for you also to share with me exactly what Clybourne Park is about.
So Clybourne Park, a character from the play A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry, that asked the Black family in A Raisin in the Sun not to move into this fictional neighborhood of Clybourne Park. 2 hours later, goes to the white family that is selling the house and asks them not to sell. And so that happens in 1959. And then in Act 2, we're in the same space in 2009. And it's the same house, but a couple is trying to renovate in a neighborhood being gentrified. So we kind of run the gamut of a lot of conversations around people being people, and race and class and all of the things that come out of going to this new location.
Okay, wonderful. Now, Brik and Kate, explain to me a little bit about your characters and where they fit in to the wonderful description that Kenny just gave.
Great. Well, in the first act, Brik and I play husband and wife. We are actually the sellers of this home, and we are getting over a huge tragedy. And I think leaving the house seemed paramount for this family to sort of move on from this tragedy. But I think in many ways, I think that they represent very sort of stock characters of that time, in that world, that post Second World War, post Korean War, 1950s sort of new normal nuclear family, which really there is no such thing as that. But I think it's a couple kind of trying to run away from tragedy, at least in the work that I'm kind of doing for Bev. And then in the second act, my character plays a descendant actually of another of a character in the first act, and she now is a sort of high-powered attorney trying to help this white couple come in and gentrify this neighborhood, which she would have absolutely would never say that that's what she's doing. I think she sees this as some kind of like urban renewal in a sense, and going back to her roots and sort of reimagining how this neighborhood can be. But it's fascinating. I think that in both of them, I think that there's so much self-deception in both of these characters, in my experience.
Yeah, and then to piggyback on what Kate said as her husband in the first act, there's there is deception in the sense of just like sense of community, that the house that we're selling in, and hence the neighbors or the community, for lack of a better term, descending upon us in this act to voice their opinions on what we are choosing to do with our house. And there's also a denial between the two of us as husband and wife, which you will learn about more through the act, and how that is a catalyst for all of this that happens. And then in Act 2, I get to play a completely different character. I'm basically a construction worker that's helping to work on the house that is now being, I don't think it's giving anything away. It's in threat of being raised to build something up bigger that just does not fit in the community anymore. So he's a very kind of objective character. He's just there to do the work, but it's kind of interjected into these scenes in Act 2 to add a bit of levity. He's a bit of a Chicago local, so it's been a great dichotomy for me for the roles.
Nice. Thank you both for that. And Dawn and Ghandia, where do your characters fit into that? And what are your characters doing in both Act 1 and Act 2?
Well, in Act 1, I play Francine, who is a domestic worker for Bev and Russ. And I've just been working for this family for many, many years. And so I'm helping them to reorganize themselves and move into their new space. And that is basically the core of my character in Act 1. I have loyalty to this family, and I've known them for a while. And so you'll see that aspect come out in that character. And Mr. Randle plays my husband, Albert, in Act 1. And so he comes to pick me up from work and, help out with my chores. And then, that's what I'll say about Act 1. And in Act 2, I play Lena, who is the great niece of the Raisin in the Sun character who purchased the house. And Mr. Randle plays my husband again, who is Kevin. And so we work for the Homeowners Association. And there's a stark contrast between Francine and Lena. However, I do see a connection between them because generationally, it's kind of the alpha and omega for my families, the outside families that are related to my characters. So we are trying to, in an effort, try to stop this new, grand, fantastic house that's being built in houses that have been there for 50 years or so. So that's my interpretation.
Nice. What about you?
Well, yes, as Ghandia said, in Act 1, I do play her husband, Albert. And I think one of the most interesting aspects for me in Act 1 is how the only, Black characters in that act, in a certain aspect, get to be like flies on the wall. They get to see, because the conversation, that's the core of the conversation, is the possibility of Black people moving into this neighborhood. And then you've got these white people sort of confronting the only Black people around as to whether or not, they would like to live near white people. So there's some tension going on in there that's can also be a little humorous. So that's the most interesting aspect of, I think, my role in Act 1. And in Act 2, I play Kevin, who is a mainstay in the neighborhood, and he's married to someone who's somewhat reluctant to accept the gentrification of the neighborhood. So like the tide is completely flipped. And then in Act 2, one of the brilliant things about the way this play is written, we get to really let it rip from a comedic standpoint. The Act 1 is very serious, if you would, but in Act 2, everything kind of comes off the rails, which leads to a lot of hopefully fun and laughs for the audience.
And that's interesting. And that's a lot going on, y'all. You have a lot going on in this play. But you're all mentioning themes of human connectedness. You're mentioning, themes of like deception and what the audience may see on the surface at first, and then kind of digging deeper into that. That's a lot. And that's a lot for the audience to digest. Now, Kenny, I'll go back to you. I've read that the play is almost satirical in nature, and that some of the humor that Don is talking about is really kind of landing some hard punches on issues that are realistic issues, but with an air of humor. Do you think the audience will pick up on that satire, or do you think that it might be a little bit raw, some of the conversations that we are privy to?
I mean, I think it's going to be a little bit raw, but I do think, it is a comedy, but it'll be interesting. We're in the black box space. And I think if this play is put in a larger space, you probably get bigger laughs, because it gives people that opportunity to, this is a show where you're like, is that person laughing? Oh, I see a person of color. Are they laughing at this? Should I laugh at this? So I think that in a smaller space, it'll be interesting to see if an audience feels that permission, especially with Act 1. It has some big laughs, but it's some heavy content. Act 2, I think the more modern take and being a little more contemporary, people will laugh. You can identify with those characters, but this is one where, the third act is the conversation you're going to have after you see Clybourne Park. Yeah.
Nice. Now, how many of you are from Colorado? Are there any longtime Colorado residents, Denver residents, everybody a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
I've been here since 1992.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been here 15 years.
Wow. Okay.
I've only been here about 3 years,
Yeah.
Okay.
so I'm kind of a newbie. But I came from Atlanta, and being in Denver, I found some striking parallels between the city of Atlanta and the city of Denver with growth, like blowing up growth,
Yeah.
maybe at some points too fast, and its impact on the neighborhoods, and what it does to communities and that kind of thing.
Let's see. Kate, what about you?
I've been here. I moved from New York about 12 years ago.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just out of curiosity, so Kate, you're from New York. Brik, you moved from Atlanta. Ghandia, Dawn, where are you from originally?
Well,
California.
I moved here from Chicago, actually.
Chicago. Ghandia, you say California?
Yeah, California, Los Angeles, born and raised in San Francisco.
Okay. And Kenny, you're from here?
Not originally. I'm from
Okay.
Maryland originally, but moved here in high school, early 90s.
That's interesting. So
Oh,
all of the
Kenny, we were
places,
here at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
all of the places you all are naming, I can think of huge, like you said, Brik, like a contrast between those places and kind of what's happening in Denver, what's been happening in Denver for about, I don't know, maybe the last decade, 10, 15 years. When you're here in Denver and you are hearing these conversations surrounding urban renewal, gentrification, development, redevelopment of these areas, what feelings are you bringing to the stage that kind of mirror the communities either that you're from or the communities that you're experiencing here in Denver when these major changes are taking place when it comes to people moving in, moving out? Um, what are the feelings that you're echoing on stage or bringing to life on stage, I should say?
Well, for me personally, I was here and watched the change of the neighborhood in Five Points. That's something that I witnessed personally because I frequented the Five Points neighborhood when I moved here, and it was like a Black Mecca. And then doing my research and knowing that that was a Black jazz capital and all of the rich history that was there, and then I watched the gentrification of that. I watched how the Black people moved out and the white people moved in, and I watched businesses close and new businesses open, and the face of it is very different now. It's completely different from when I first moved here, and so that's something that struck me right away when I read the play, was that personal experience of watching that. And so with Lena's character in particular, I'm really basing a lot of my choices on me personally witnessing that. And so that's where I'm coming from with that. It just feels like the modern Lena, she just feels a loss. There's going to be a loss if these people come in, which is similar to some of the ideologies in the first act, which I think is quite brilliant because it depends on your view of what you see, and what that value means to you. So that's what I'm drawing on personally.
I can't speak to the Denver situation, but I remember when I lived in Chicago briefly after college, and I remember a real estate agent saying to my friend and I, and we were in our early 20s, and we were poor actors, and they're like, "Oh no, there's this great neighborhood. It's called Wicker Park, and you know what? You will be urban pioneers." And I remember thinking that listening to that word, and I was like, that is a horrifying thing to say. There are people living there. I am not a pioneer. That is a fully formed community. Where's the pioneer? Like, I'm not gonna get in my little wagon and go across,
The plains.
Yeah, it's so yeah, it's really and this was in the early 90s. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, from when I was in Atlanta in 2000, things were already underway. Multiple, and it's funny, this is called Clybourne Park because in Atlanta there was Inman Park, Candler Park. They're East Atlanta, all areas that were already undergoing that gentrification and the growing pains associated with that. So that all of a sudden you would have these variations in neighborhoods where you would have new construction going on or houses being renovated, and then you would turn the corner and then there would be, not extreme, but I mean, it would be very lower income neighborhoods that were there. And, almost kind of, it's my perception, but like, trembling going, is this coming our way? Are we going to get priced out of our neighborhood and have to find a new place to live?
Mm-hmm.
And the prices in Atlanta were already so high. It's like, where do you go? You just get pushed further and further out of the city. And the newer houses that were coming in were then raising property taxes on people that were already stressed for money and income. So yeah, coming here to Denver and realizing, oh, it's like this almost in most major cities that are having this boom that's going on, and the people that have been living there for generations that are now being edged out, and everyone's like, sorry, can't stop progress, and you're like, but what do you do, to help these people that now have nowhere to go, if they're getting priced out of their neighborhoods, can't afford to live there anymore, which is the other.
Good point. Yeah. Don, does this hit home for you?
Yeah. I mean, because I actually, having lived in Chicago for quite a while, I lived in various neighborhoods, so I saw some of the gentrification firsthand, especially when we bought our first home. So I'm a little bit familiar with that, but it's interesting, Kate mentioned urban pioneer, and, getting in a stagecoach and traveling across the plains. What's interesting, especially about this story, is there's no more new land to find. There's no more new land to discover. So what happens is they just tend to like reverse. Oh, we've come up against the wall. Let's turn around and go back and start taking these places that we took and, and then left for whatever reason. So that's very interesting. Very interesting. The other thing about this, the way this play is written is, well, I always believe that when there's good writing, there are no wasted words. So it's really, especially when you look at the contrast between these two acts, it's very interesting to me that there are these little words or phrases that seem like throwaways, but as you get deeper into the play, you realize there is a reason for every word that it says. Every word has like a hidden gem in it, even if it's seems like something that's just being thrown away and has no specific purpose. So super interesting in that regard.
And to piggyback onto what Don said, if you come to see the show, a lot of lines are mirrored from Act 1 to Act 2. And situations as well. I don't want to give away. Don and I have got a cool exchange with our characters in Act 1 that then also reverses, and the situation is flipped between us in Act 2, which I feel like it's kind of Bruce Norris, the playwright, saying the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Really?
It's just, but it's great. There's just certain lines that you also go, oh my gosh, this character said that exact thing in Act 1, and now in Act 2, in the modern day, they're saying it still, and nothing's changed.
There are several parallels with the characters in there too. My character has it also with the character in Act 1, which I will not say because it's very interesting and you should come and see it. It's just a real twist. You think things are going one way in Act 1, and then Act 2 smacks you right in the face with laughter and some punchy parts. But I feel like this play is brilliantly written with so much balance. It's kind of like real life. And so the conversations are realistic. The situations are realistic. And a lot of it is timeless. I found many things are very relevant right now. So and I love the Easter egg part of it. Where like, oh my gosh, he said that. Oh, now she said that. Oh, it gives your mind things to mine in it. So it's a really entertaining story.
Well, that's all really cool. I love what Don said. I love what Brik said. And Kenny, back to you. It must be a lot of weight on your shoulders to make sure that every one of those lines delivers a punch. I mean, when you think about coming here from Maryland and maybe your early experiences in Maryland, I'm not sure what part of Maryland are you
Like
from?
45 minutes outside of DC, a town called Hagerstown.
Oh, okay, cool. So when you're coming here to Denver then and experiencing all of this, is it really like intentional to make sure that every little um bit of symbolism, I guess, or everything that's mirrored really, really hits home? And how do you make sure that everything flows together from Act 1 to Act 2 without the audience getting lost?
I kind of think of Clybourne Park as two plays. In my head, it's kind of, you're doing two very different things here. I think coming from the East Coast to Denver was eye-opening for me. I was just used to seeing more Black folks than I saw when I moved here, being a young person in high school. But I think the thing I really want to focus on is making this feel like the audience is really watching something play out. They are voyeurs watching something that feels realistic. The heavy lift is not for me. It is for the wonderful team and the great cast that we have that are already doing that work. But I think a big focus for me is that this play is about a lot of conversations people avoid. And whether that was in 1959 or 2009, race, class, gender, like all the things we're talking about, it's a lot of conversations people tend to have with like-minded individuals. When I'm mostly talking about gentrification or seeing how 5 points has changed, I'm talking about that with people who agree. with me. And I think that's the thing about this that I want an audience to take away. You are watching something play out because we often don't have these conversations together. And especially right now, either we ignore it or it's reduced to these little sound bites that we all roll our eyes about and move on. And I think that's the brilliant thing about the play. It's conversation that's why you see yourself in it. There's no good guys and bad guys in Clybourne Park. It's people. Everybody is flawed. Mm-hmm. Everybody has something that's underlying just as life is, which is what I think is really smart about the script. So.
Very nice. Mm-hmm. And to your point, Kate, I love that you shared your experience living in Chicago and hearing that urban pioneer phrase. I think that that's so important, even just to hear you say that, because most people who are experiencing gentrification or experiencing, who did experience maybe their neighborhoods changing in the 50s or in the 60s, I don't think that we actually hear those true instances of like what happened, how they felt, to have somebody tell you that you're going to be an urban pioneer, and for that to stick out in your mind, and however long later it still sits with you. I think that that's important for people to hear and understand, to Kenny's point, because we are all human, and that is the human experience. I'll share with you all just briefly that I went to college in Illinois, and so Chicago was like a second home to me. So Kate and Dawn, when you're talking about Chicago, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that, and I see, like the whole South Side being transformed. So on the other hand of that, and on the flip side, you think about where are these people going to go? And going back to what Brik said earlier, I feel like from a developer standpoint, maybe it's important for them to see Clybourne Park from the perspective of a real estate developer who's like, I know that there needs to be housing. Affordable housing is huge in Denver right now. So where do we make this housing where it benefits all people without doing a lot of harm, or doing as little harm as possible, I guess. So I could sit here and talk to you all day about each of your perspectives and your backgrounds and your characters. I think it's fascinating, but I really think that you're doing a great job of selling the play, because now I want to go see it, and I want to see all those conversations myself, and explore what this dichotomy is and explore these dialogues. I want to know from each of you though, what is your favorite thing about this play, and why should people come out to see it? I could talk about me and why I want to come see it, but who do you really think needs to be in this audience, and why?
That's a big question.
Huge.
Well, and you all have different perspectives, so maybe they're all different answers. That would be kind of cool.
I would like to see everybody come.
Yeah.
Because in my very, San Francisco, Berkeley hippie mind, I have this beautiful way that I would love the world to go. And the way that I would love the world to go is for everybody to listen to each other and accept each other, even though, some of the things that you may hear are hard to hear. But that's part of developing a beautiful community where Black people and white people can live harmoniously amongst each other, and find out that we have a lot more in common than we don't. And so that's one of the things about the play that in my hopeless romantic mind breaks my heart every time. And I don't want my heart to be broken like that, because we're all people and we all can live together harmoniously if we just really listen to each other and stop trying to pick out the differences between each other. And that's why I would love to see a full audience of, Black people and white people, and really coming together and thinking about the the things, the stereotypes or the prejudices that they have, and thinking how ridiculous they are and finding the root of those and solving that. I'm hoping that this play does that, because for me it does, because I've learned some things about how I think about things.
Well, like Gandhi has started out, you know, I just like to see, I think Brik may have said this as well, but I'd like to see everybody there. It doesn't matter to me, just as many people as possible. But I think particularly what I'd like to see, or who I'd like to see the play, are people that are familiar with A Raisin in the Sun, but aren't familiar with Clybourne Park. Because I think if you were to read or watch Raisin in the Sun, you know, recently, you might have some questions. Some of those, I wonder what happened. I wonder why. I wonder how, right? And this play actually answers a lot of those questions in some very exciting and unexpected ways. So I think some people will get it. That's what I'd like to see, observe this play, people familiar with Raisin in the Sun, and see what they think about the way some of the questions from that story were answered in this one.
Yeah.
And I think also for me, like the little devil in me, or the pot steward, as it were, has the secret hope that there are people that will come see this that are the ones that are like, oh, it's not as bad as that. You know, things are much better now than they were in the past. You know, it's those people that are, you know, they're like, well, they're just taking a clip from the news and they're just trying to make it seem like it's worse than it is. It's like, no, it's still kind of the same. You know, again, to me, that's the big thing that I just kind of walk away with when finishing the play, is that the more things change, the more they stay the same. And then maybe people go, some people go, oh, well, they wrote an entire play about this, and wow, 1959 to 2009, there's still a lot of similarities, you know, and for people that think, oh, we've come so far, and it's like, yeah, but we still have a lot further to go. And it's not just okay, you know, especially when people are living in their own little communities that are isolated from maybe what the rest of their fellow countrymen or women are going through or experiencing. So I would love for some people to come to see this show and be like, oh, I hear it's, you know, about the past and future, and or past and present, and then go, oh, okay, well, I didn't realize this, you know, and that maybe they kind of have their eyes wide.
And I think I would like, I would love for people who are familiar with Raisin in the Sun, but I would also love people who are not at all familiar with this play at all. It would be great to have some people who think that you know, we've passed all these conversations. We don't have to have these conversations. We live in a post-race society. I'm not racist. You're not like we, you know. We're all, you know, there's no reason. I want those people to come and see it and realize, oh, and see themselves in these characters. I think that that's where the conversation should really start, and people who are thoughtful and willing to sort of really go a little bit deeper in this show, and people who want to laugh at themselves.
Oh yes. It's so funny. Oh my gosh, it's so funny.
Yeah.
These three people are so funny. It's funny. It's so funny. It's like sitcom funny. I'm not even lying. It's for real. It's funny. For real. Sorry. It's just so funny to me. Like, okay, it's funny. Sorry.
Yeah, I think for me, this show is for anybody. The acts take place 50 years apart, but it's not about one community or one era. It is about all of us, and it's about something that is also uniquely American in a lot of ways. But I really hope, I'm happy we're doing this interview with Urban Spectrum, because I really hope to see a more diverse group of people that check this out. I think the piece works best when you have a diverse audience. That makes it more interesting. You start to question what you laugh at. And I think partly that's because in so many ways we are still very segregated in a lot of ways in this country. And so I hope we get to see a wider cross-section of people that get to take this in together. Because I think just making people talk about these avoided conversations is the real gift of this piece. I really do think that.
Well, you all have some wonderful reasons why everyone should come out to see this play. And I must say, it is right on time. I feel like the timing of this production couldn't be more perfect. And I think, especially here in Denver, it's like there's this underlying tension where people don't really know how to amplify some of these important conversations so that we can move forward and um, still live in a safe and progressive society where everyone is not feeling afraid and terrible about what's going to happen in the next 4 years. So the socioeconomic timing is perfect, right on point. And thank you all so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you sharing a bit of your perspective. um I would love to see like a talk back maybe session after one of the performances or productions or something, just so that we can get a little bit more about each of your own thoughts after actually seeing the play. So I love it. I can't wait to see it. Thank you all again for taking your time, and break a leg out there. Good luck.
Thank you, Ruby.
Thank
Ruby,
you,
thank you so
Ruby.
much.
Thank you so much.